This episode is especially for you. Let me start by asking you a simple question. Have you ever experienced this situation? Before we begin, let me tell you something very honestly. If you are listening or watching this podcast thinking that my English is not good enough, this episode is especially for you. Because after working with hundreds of students and professionals, I can confidently say this: English is rarely the real problem. And in today's episode, I want to explain why. Welcome to the very first episode of Speak Smart, a podcast where we talk about communication the way it actually happens in real life and not the way textbooks describe it. Let me start by asking you a simple question. Have you ever experienced this situation? You know the answer, you understand the topic, you even have the right words in your mind. But the moment you open your mouth, your voice drops. Your sentences feel messy and suddenly you feel underconfident. Now, here's the interesting part. Later, when you are alone or talking to a friend, you replay the same answer in your head and think, I could have said this so much better. If this has ever happened to you, trust me, you're not bad at English. There's a very dangerous myth we've been sold. Not told, but sold. If you improve your English, your confidence will improve. But the real life doesn't work like that. I've seen people with excellent grammar, strong vocabulary, and even international exposure still struggle to speak confidently. At the same time, I've seen people with average English command rooms, lead meetings, and leave strong impressions. So, what's the real difference? The difference is clarity. Let me give you a very realistic example, something that I see almost every week. Imagine a working professional, let's call him Rahul. Rahul works in an IT company. He understands his work, he prepares, he knows English reasonably well. And one day in a team meeting, his manager asks him a simple question: Rahul, can you quickly explain the status of this task? Rahul starts like this. Actually, so basically, what happened was the problem is not his English. The problem is that Rahul himself is not clear what he wants to say first. So his brain is doing three things at the same time: choosing English words, translating his thoughts from his native language, and figuring out the actual structure of the answer. That is an actual overload, and that overload creates nervousness. Now imagine another version of Rahul. Same English, same knowledge. But this time, before speaking, he decides one thing clearly in his head, that I'll say the status in one line and then explain. So he basically tells that the task is 80% complete and the delay happened due to dependency issues or whatever the issues, and we'll close it by Friday. Same person, same English. But now he sounds more confident. The confidence did not come from vocabulary, it came from clarity and structure. Another big issue that I often see is, especially with the Indian speakers, is constant translation. We think in Hindi or another language and translate into English and then we speak. So by the time we speak, our confidence has already dropped because we are working simultaneously on the other task, that is of translation. So let me say this very clearly. You don't need to think in English to speak well. That is what most people often mistake you with. Most people often keep telling, think in English. No, that's not the point. You need to think clearly. Even native speakers take pauses, even they restructure sentences. We need to remember this. So, restructuring of sentences can keep happening. You can keep taking pauses, but the clarity is what is required. Okay, so the difference is that they're not judging themselves while speaking. The only difference with the native speakers, with the native English speakers, I mean, if you take one thing from this episode, let it be this particular thing, which is clarity. Have that clarity, do not translate, and think clearly. Structure is your confidence shortcut, basically. So take this learning from this particular episode, that structuring of your thoughts is your confidence shortcut. So before speaking, silently decide, what's my main point? What's one example that I can give relating to the answer for that credibility in your answer? And how do I close that answer? That's it. That's the clear structure. When structure is clear, your body relaxes and your tone stabilizes, and that confidence shows. This is why fillers disappear naturally. Not because you forced them out, but because your brain knows what comes next. Here's a very simple exercise for you all to do now. Today or tomorrow, before speaking in any situation, meeting, interview, classrooms, pause for 2 seconds before you answer. Decide what your first sentence is, what you're going to say. Not perfect English, just clear thought. And you'll really feel that difference immediately. So, this podcast, Speak Smart, exists for one reason: to remove unnecessary fear around communication. Remember one thing: English is just a language, it is merely a tool. Confidence is a skill, and skills can be learned. Every Sunday, we'll break communication down into simple, practical ideas you can actually use. If this episode helped you even a little, subscribe to Communicate and share this with someone who needs confidence more than grammar. So until next time, speak smart, not perfect. Thank you. Take care.